Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by our good friends at Southern Stone Restaurant, located at Patterson and Rogers in Bloomington, where each Wednesday evening at 7:05, you can catch Inside Indiana Football with Don Fischer and Coach Tom Allen. Great place to stop in and have a tremendous meal and listen to the guys. Also, I'm sure they'll be serving a little birthday cake this week, as I understand it's today Mr. Fisher's birthday. So happy 50th birthday, Don. Congratulations.
50th birthday? I wish that was true. This is 76 trombones, boys. So
it seems like 50. If you're ever around Don, he makes you jealous because you're like, gosh, can I be that young when I'm not? It's like I want to look that young now.
Get inside my body, and you'll see what 76 feels like.
Great Don Fischer joins us here after a tough weekend for Indiana on the road in Cincinnati after starting off 3-0. They're obviously their sternest test to date. We knew that was going to be the case, but man, it did not turn out in any way like anyone hoped on either side of the ball.
No, it did not. Very disappointing performance by Indiana on Saturday. More so from a first half standpoint, but we've seen the slow starts in first halves for this team all season long. Unfortunately, in this one, they got bludgeoned in the first half. 38-10 was halftime score. Cincinnati went to the locker room, I'm sure believing that they were going to put 2 or 3 more touchdowns on the board. The good news is that Indiana was able to turn things around in the second half a little bit, be much more defensive oriented, the way that we would expect an Indiana football team to be. But the way that they got bludgeoned in the first half with the 75, 34, 32-yard touchdown passes to Tyler Scott, I could not believe what I was seeing, because Indiana's defensive backs just got burnt time after time after time. And this is likely their best position group on the football field. And so your best players were getting torched in this ball game. And it's just hard to understand what was going on there. Now, granted, they turned it around in the second half, but that was way too little too late. And without question, Cincinnati ruled the roost the rest of the contest. But here's the other aspect of it. Indiana's offense was pathetic in this ball game. And I'm talking about the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line allowed 13 hits on their quarterback, on Connor Bazelak, 5 sacks. Couldn't open many holes for the run game, just like it's been the problem all year long. And so you're playing one-handed out there as a QB. You've got very little chance to get much done. And thank God for Cam Camper, who has just been a go-to guy for Bazelak all season long and continued to be on Saturday. He was terrific again. But outside of that, what do you look to as a positive from this football game? And that's what bothers me the most, because let's face it, Cincinnati is as good as a lot of teams in the Big Ten.
Dustin?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that was staggering to me, Don, was not only the sacks that they surrendered, but I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 to 12 tackles for loss that they allowed. People look at the stat line and see that Bazelak's numbers weren't very good. 31-66, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But when you've got no protection, I think it's an accomplishment that he just finished this game. And I'm not even being sarcastic about that.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, your quarterback gets hit 13 times in this game. I mean, it's unfathomable that he can survive all that and continue to survive it as the season goes along. Think about this. If Michael Penix was the quarterback and that happened to him, he'd be out by now for the rest of the year. I mean,
right.
Because he couldn't take the kind of hits that this guy had to take on Saturday. Cincinnati plays a 3-man front. I mean, they were getting pressure all day long from those 3 guys. Our offensive line couldn't block those guys. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but this offensive line is the biggest problem on this football team, because they can't open holes for the run game for the most part. and they can't block well enough to allow your passing game to be as effective as it could or should be.
Yeah,
Bottom
and
line.
that's I said earlier in the show that this is not on Walt Bell or a lot of the guys that are trying. It's just when you can't run the ball to establish a passing game or pass the game to establish either, or do either, you there's just nothing you can do. There's nothing that can be expected other than hope. And then when the defense is not putting you in good positions, when they're giving up points, you're just getting buried further in a hole. The confidence goes farther and farther down. Right. And these kids are working as hard as they can, but it's just not working. And Tom has said changes have to come. My question is, after you've gone through a spring camp and the fall camp and all this stuff was introduced because all these new faces, how are you going to implement that kind of change that quickly that could impact a team enough to where it changes this?
Well, that's the question. Because if they continue to struggle on the offensive line like this against the competition you're about to face, you're not going to win another ball game. And that's sad to say. After you start out with 3 wins to start the season, you're 3-1 at this point. Indiana right now is going to face a Nebraska team this coming week that has struggled all year to win ball games. But you know how many offensive yards they're averaging per game? 451. So they've got an offense that can, and they're balanced. I mean, it's about half and half of their 50-50 passing game and 50-50 run game. And granted, they give up a lot of yards offensively to the opponent, over 500 yards in that regard. But this team right now hasn't even come close to having a 500-yard game. I mean, they have struggled in every ball game offensively at this juncture. So we're looking at a test on Saturday against the Nebraska team that has had 2 weeks to get ready for this football game because their last game was against Oklahoma and they got plastered. The rest of their games this year, their losses were very close ball games. That's why Scott Frost got fired, because they kept losing close ball games over the last 2 or 3 years now. And we're going to play in a stadium that's one of the best in the Big Ten as far as the crowd and the celebration of college football. If you wanted to go someplace every weekend to a college football game, I guarantee a Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska is as good a spot as you'll spend. Those people support their football team. Doesn't matter if they're winning or losing, they are there. And it's 87,000 strong every week, and it's been that way since 1963. They have sold out every game since 63.
385 consecutive sellouts, although that you mentioned that streak is tenuously hanging this week for Indiana's game with about 1,000 seats left to be sold. I'm certain a businessman will come along and not let that die. But in researching that, I was like, what is the number up to? Because remember, it was like 360 or 70 when Indiana was there last time in 2019, which that was a huge win for the program. And it would be another big win for this program if they could go down and win in Nebraska. Even though Nebraska is not great, doesn't matter. When you win in those kinds of environments that you just spoke of, it carries a little something extra with it.
No question. And like I said, their fan base shows up, and even if they've got 1,000 tickets left, they'll find some way to get those distributed someplace along the way. And it will be, and trust me, this Nebraska team probably thinks this is our best opportunity to turn this season around right now, this coming weekend. And they can do it. I mean, and again, 2 weeks to prepare. I don't care who the coaching staff is. These guys are all guys that have coached and been very successful, maybe at other places. This is going to be a test for Indiana. There's no doubt about it.
I think we got to get you. Go ahead.
Oh, I just had one more question because Don mentioned it about the defensive backs earlier. To me, I think one of the most concerning things, not only because the offensive line is not playing well, but the foundation of this team under Tom Allen has typically been strong defensive play. He took back over. I think a lot of people felt comforted by that, thinking we're going to return to form, create some turnovers, tackling will be better. not so much. To me, that's a major concern when a guy who has been so defensively focused takes back over, and you look this bad defensively. I've got some serious concerns. Maybe he might have to find a defensive coordinator in the offseason because it might just be too much for him to handle. I don't know what the answer is, but that's quite troubling through 4 games.
There's no doubt. And I can't answer the question why they look so bad Saturday. Because, again, the strongest position group on this football team is probably the defensive backfield. I mean, you got 3 starters that have been there forever. And guys that know how to play. You've had other guys that have stepped up when those guys have been off the field. And Saturday, that didn't happen. I mean, that first half was just atrocious from a defensive backfield standpoint. So I'm going to look at that as an anomaly and hope that is not the norm that we're about to see for the rest of the season. I don't know if Devon Matthews is hurt. He did not play much in this football game. DJ Matthews was out the entire second half. I don't know that I think he was a no-show in the second half completely, if I remember correctly. And didn't see him much in the first half either. So there may be some issues with injuries with this football team right now that we don't know about because they never talk about it. They never want you to know what those injury situations are. And I understand to some degree that philosophy. I also think I wish they had the NFL thing where they have an injury report that you can see.
You have to tell them,
Exactly. And so that we actually could see what was going on there, so we would know something. But that's part of the structure of college football these days that we don't get to see that. But all that said, this team has just simply got to play better. The offensive line has got to play better. Hopefully, they get some people back from the offensive line that have been hurt. Obviously, Zach Carpenter. And Caleb Murphy has done a heck of a job considering that this kid was the 3rd string center and has worked his butt off because they all say that this kid works his tail off every single game. But he's
the biggest name of he's the biggest name of the year, the biggest success story of the year. He's getting a lot of attention, rightly so.
But there's a reason he was the 3rd string center. Okay. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Obviously the other 2 guys are ahead of him, Zach Carpenter and Cameron Knight, and Knight hasn't been available either. So you've had your top 2 guys at the center position out, and then you've got a Division II player who transfers to Indiana and has done a pretty decent job, Parker Hanna, in taking over for Matthew Bedford. But again, that's the most experienced guy in your offensive line that's gone for the rest of the year. So there's reasons that the offensive line isn't dealing as well as they should be with what they're supposed to be doing out there. But at the same time, where's the backup? Where's the development of these other guys that they've got? Some guys that were coming in with pretty high credentials out of high school that are 2 years or maybe even 3 years into this program now, and they're still on the sideline, not playing. Yep. So I don't know what the answer is, guys. I'm not an X and O guy, and I'm not a personnel guy. I'm a guy that just tells you what I see, and right now what I see is not a promising scenario.